Hello? Everybody ready? So we're just using the mics because we're recording, so we want to make sure we get the audio good. And we're going to get started, and anyone who comes as we're in progress, that's fine. So why don't we go ahead and call to order the Narragansett Town Council work session, joint work session with the Planning Board to discuss the peer parking study assessments and options. It is 6:01, June 13th, 2022. So we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks for being here, everybody, and for the work that's already been done. I know that community development has put a good amount of time into this, and the Planning Board has met to discuss as well. For anyone on the council, there have been a few workshops with the public that have taken place, I think led by Mike and his staff, to get input from both residents and businesses, as well as work with a consultant to update the previous parking, basic parking study that already existed. So today what we want to do is kind of have just an open discussion with the board and with staff to see what we have for options, to see kind of what the feedback was like and the input from the residents and from the businesses, and hopefully get to a point where we can then, this could go back to planning so that they can talk more about it and then send the council some more formal recommendations. But again, we wanted to make sure to have this step in the process and not skip this. We wanted to do this more thoroughly. Before we get into some discussion, some kind of back and forth discussion, I thought it would make sense to have Mike DeLuca, the Community Development Director, give a little bit of background and kind of just where we're at and what we've been looking at for options so that we're all on the same page of what the discussion points really are. So Mike, if you don't mind.
Thank you, Council President. As you said, there's somewhat of a long history here. And it starts in 2010 or 11 with John Burke being hired by then town manager, was it Dean? Yes, it was acting town manager Dean Hoxie. And he did a walkthrough of the Pier Village area. He also did a study of technology and methodologies that he used in other tourist destinations. And he gave us a report. For various reasons, while there were some suggestions, recommendations in that report, no changes in ordinances or any other actions were undertaken following that. So Town Manager Tierney decided to hire Mr. Burke again last year to come back, take a look at it. Interestingly, there was about a 10-year window of time that had passed to bring us up to date and to bring himself up to date on what our conditions here were. And also, since 10 years had passed, there was also potential for new technologies and methods to be applied. So he did that, and he wrote us a report. You all have a copy of that, I believe. And he identified several things that were of concern, the things that we kind of know, like there's congestion along the seawall area. There is some usage of the parking along the seawall and Boone Street for beach usage. And these are things that are not, any surprise to anyone. And he also found some roadways that were not necessarily that had some potential for additional on-street parking to be identified. But then he pointed out some other options for us to consider. So what I'm going to do is first I'm going to show you the area. We can visually get ourselves oriented. And this map that you see on the wall is the area that was actually done around 2012 or 13 by Jill Sabo of my staff. And then we updated it in 2019 because a few parking regulations had changed. So I know you can't read that. I'm going to show you close-ups in a second. But the red is no parking allowed. The orange is timed parking, duration parking, 2-hour, 3-hour limit, whatever. and the yellow is permit parking. So here's the close-up of the north end of that, and what you see here is this is the town beach, the divided road in front of the town beach, and then Boston Neck Road running all the way up to Sprague Bridge. And as you can see, everything is parking prohibited, including the side streets. There's a couple of small little private streets, Dunes Court, South Trail, that don't have any regulations on them at all. And I do believe that on some occasions, people actually park on that road because there are some people that know that those are available. But for whatever reason, we have not instituted any regulation on them. So let's move down to the area more prevalent and of concern. So just to get everybody's orientation, I don't have the photo attached to this, so you can't see the buildings, but this is Pier Village right here, okay? Casino Park, Veterans Park. The Towers is roughly right there. Coast Guard House sits right about there. Way down here at the bottom is the wishing well at the end of South Pier Road. That's Boone Street. All the way over to Kingstown Road, and police fire station is located right about there. The ice house is way up here. Okay, this is the signal at the ice house, the gas station. So that's what we're looking at. And as you can see, without me going through every single street, which I refuse to do. No, I'm sorry, I will if you want me to. You can see that there's a variety of regulations here, just by looking at the various colors and the way that they're located. Now let's just take Congdon Street, for example. Here's Congdon Street. So the playground is right about here. So there's no parking on the left side, but there's no regulation on the right, the north side. No parking on the south side. No regulation on the north side. The public knows this. There's parking there on the weekends. Certainly you can see Ocean Road. It's colored in yellow, which we probably should have used a different color. But you can see there's no additional yellow stripe on either side or red stripe or anything. There's no limitation on parking on Ocean Road. It's free. It's not time limited. It's not permit parking. All the way up to the curve in the road where it meets the intersection of Boston Neck Road and Beach Street. That's actually Beach Street right there. So we have a variety here. The orange here right along in front of Trio and that's time-limited parking. Time-limited parking here in front of Warm Winds. But then you come to some other streets like Caswell Street south of Kingstown Road. It's prohibited on one side, no limitation on the other. So we've got what I would consider a patchwork quilt of regulations. And the public knows where the openings are. Let's take the west side of Boone Street between Central and South Pier Road. That is available for parking. It's unrestricted. As you know, the center stripe on Boone Street is offset. It's not perfectly centered. So when you're going northbound, the lane is just barely about 10, 11 feet wide. You can just travel in that lane. But the southbound lane is much wider, and the parking is allowed on the west side of Boone Street. Same thing here with Rodman. Rodman has no regulations on either side of the street. So Mr. Burke pointed this all out to us and said, you know, you have a very disjointed sort of set of regulations, and you probably want to, there should be a point in time where you take a look at this holistically and say, what do we really want to do here? And so his report gave us 5 key things to give consideration to, and I've highlighted them here for you. In the Pier Marketplace and on Boone Street area, he felt as though we needed to expand the 2-hour parking limit for those areas. So those areas that don't have any regulation on them now, because there's such high demand, and we know why they're high demand between the commercial businesses in Pier Village and the beach, obviously, they should be limited, or the on-street, they should be limited to 2 hours. And that was a high emphasis, not only from him, but I'll get into it a little bit later with the focus groups. They were universally in agreement on that. He then said, consider adding seasonal time limit parking of 3 hours along Ocean Road from Memorial Square, which is the street the post office is on, all the way down to Central Street, on both sides. 3 hours, a little bit longer, allows for the restaurants, particularly Coast Guard House and the Shore House, to benefit by that someone who's going there for dinner doesn't have to worry about hurrying out. And then south of Central Street, he didn't speak to that as to whether or not it ought to be regulated. He did also flip the discussion a bit and said, we could consider paid parking in certain areas that are both non-regulated at the moment, but also are time limit areas. Change that to paid parking. And what he was indicating in more detail in the report was these high attraction areas, closest to the beach, closest to the restaurants, people would be willing to pay to park in those locations. And he pointed out places, he had done studies, Jim, you might have to help me with the towns. There were two towns in Maine that he did some study on. I personally witnessed in my own travels on-street meters, standard old school meters in Rockport and Gloucester, Massachusetts.
He did quite a few coastal communities.
Yeah, coastal communities.
Communities that have the same issue.
Yep. And so that's something to give thought to. I know that's been kind of a negative in our town, that people have been averse to that, but it's something to put on the table to give some consideration to think about. We don't have to buy into any of these things. And in fact, his report points out that some of these proposals offset others. They negate others. So we can't say, let's do it all. That's not what he was telling us. He was telling us, depending upon the priorities that the town has, we can implement some of these sorts of mechanisms, but we don't necessarily, and we shouldn't think about trying to implement everything. He also talked about, going to item 4, shared lot parking agreements. He noted in several of the other locations that he had done work that things like church parking lots were made available for public usage during the periods of time when the church is not using it. Private school parking lots as well as public school parking lots. And in the case where it's not owned by the town, that there would be some sort of a lease agreement and the town would pay for that usage. Presumably we'd get paid back through what we would charge for people to park there. He points out that it should be within a 5-minute walk of the destination, whatever the destination is. That narrows it down, it does. And I just went for a walk a few minutes ago, and I walked from here down to Boone Street and back, and it slowly, because at the end of the day I was a little tired, and it took me about 10 minutes in each direction. So, think about that. That's about 6 blocks. So we're talking about 3 or 4 block distance. You're right. You're right. That's a commercial use in a residential zone. So that would be off the table. And the last was more of a technology suggestion. He knows that our police department has been using this standard ticketing mechanism. But there are, all kinds of technology that could be used for ticketing that can create a database. That can be, the database can be used for us to identify, the number of tickets, where they've been located, the whole bit. So it would help us to understand where our hot spots and cold spots are over the course of time. So that's a very brief summary of Mr. Burke's report. And as you know, as the president mentioned a few minutes ago, what I did in the interim after we got that report, we shared it with you folks, shared it with the planning board, was that I established and I brought together 3 focus groups. One focus group was just businesses in town, different businesses. One of the other focus groups was restaurants only. So, and then the third one was residents, people who didn't have a business in town. So we met 3 times, these 3 different groups met. We had a list of 9 questions that we asked them. And And I had my staff sitting with me. We typed up the commentary that they gave us in raw form. It was just kind of run-on sentences and things like that. But then I pulled all that material together, and I brought together these, what I thought were the 8 key points that came out of that, out of the combined groups' impressions of the concerns, and where we saw a crossover and agreement. So the first item was to create more parking. And I think all 3 groups talked about the Boone Street Playground as having land available that could be potentially used for parking. How we would fit it in there is another question altogether. But the prospect that we own the Boone Street Playground, it wouldn't cost us anything to acquire. It would only cost us money to construct. Provide off-site parking as an escape valve to accommodate demand. That was inferred again from Mr. Burke's study, finding parking areas that either we don't own, that we could lease, or parking areas that we do own. And we know we own, we have the middle school, high school campus, we have the elementary school parking lot. So those are there as potential opportunities. Whether we choose to go that way or not is a question for you folks. Reinstitute the peer trolley. That came up in all 3 meetings. And many people thought that was a really great thing because it helped people who don't know that much about the town to get around. And they pointed out that not only does it serve those folks to getting to the beach or to the pier area, but it also keeps all this added traffic off the road of people driving around in circles trying to find a parking space. So, you get congestion with all these cars going back and forth trying to find an available space. They brought up a parking garage. I'm not going to get into that in any detail, but the thought was raised. Of course, at least 2 of the 3 groups pointed out the pros and cons of a parking garage. And we won't get into that in long detail, but I'm sure you can all think of the pros and the cons on that. They also came up with a one-way traffic loop idea. The concept being one of our biggest areas of congestion is Ocean Road, particularly the area in front of the seawall. And if we could turn that into a one-way, offset by a one-way in the opposite direction on Boone Street, then we could accommodate parking and simplify the traffic pattern. One thing that would really come out of it would be we'd get much more additional parking on Boone Street because we'd be able to park on both sides. Right now, we only park on one. And of course, on Ocean Road, the advantage wouldn't be added parking because we wouldn't get added parking, but we would get a loosening up of that congestion of traffic. And keep in mind, the groups were also thinking about pedestrians as well as bicyclists when they were talking about this. The next one was to increase the parking violation fine. It was several people in the focus groups pointed out that they knew people, I had talked to people who were very willing to accept the fine that we charge because it's no more than it is to pay for parking in other locations. So they parked wherever they wanted. I believe it's 50 at the moment, yes. And then the last 2, well, the next to last one is about managing our parking requirements. If we are going to change any parking regulations, one of the thoughts was maybe we shorten the time window, so that instead of it being May 15th to September 15th, which is some of the areas, Narragansett Avenue is part of it. Can't remember where I've seen the signs elsewhere. Then maybe we pick it up around this time, mid-June through Labor Day, and cut it off at Labor Day, because those are really the high times, the busiest portion of the season. Then they pointed out 2 more things that are associated but not parking directly. One is crosswalks. Crosswalks with neck downs, and that's one of those transportation lingo terms. It's like what we see in front of the library, across the street from, right in front of the senior housing near the library. That widened sidewalk, and you got it on both sides, so there's a segment there where there's no curb lane at all. It's just one lane in each direction. That creates a sense of safety for the pedestrian crossing because it's a narrower area. And they've been known to be very successful in high traffic and urban areas to install neck downs. And the last is to repave sidewalks, which we know some areas are in pretty bad shape. So those were the key items that were brought up, and I would just ask the council and the planning board to give me some direction on where you'd like to take it.
Mike, can you just, excuse me if I might, can you just, the focus groups talk a lot about the time parking too.
Yeah.
So that was on the previous
Yeah.
consultant list, but that was also a point of emphasis.
That's absolutely
I
true.
talked to a couple of restaurant owners, and they thought that was their number one concern to generate.
Yeah, in my memo to the planning board, which has a little bit more detail about the focus groups than the one that you folks received, I pointed out that this was the key item that was brought up by all three focus groups, which is how to get turnover in the on-street parking. And the restaurateurs were completely in agreement that if we could have time limit parking, not just Boone Street, but Boone Street is kind of the poster child for it because there's not a lot of on-street parking available, that if we can get turnover, they can accommodate their clientele to a greater degree. So Ms. Fleming is right, that was one of the key points. It was kind of the lead-off point for each one of those groups to start their conversation. So because I didn't put it in this slide that you're looking at, doesn't mean it wasn't important. It was shown on the previous slide as the first point, and the focus groups were in total agreement on that. So I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you, Mike. I mean, it definitely looks like there's a lot of interesting options. I know that people just kind of brought up different ideas, not necessarily always great, not bad, but they're out there, so we can discuss them. I also just want to mention to the one member out in the audience, we will take public comment at the end of tonight, so we'll be doing that at the end. Is there two? Oh, we do have two, yeah. We'll take some. I see Jerry back there. We will take some public comment. Three, actually. We'll take some public comment at the end. Also, thanks to the town manager, Jim Tierney, and Janet, our town clerk, for being here tonight as well. So if you guys don't mind, I was thinking we could start with the planning board members. And if you guys could just basically, if you're interested in speaking, just kind of share your general thoughts or any questions you might have for Mike or for the council. We could just go down the line, and then we'll go to the council afterwards. So, however you want to start it off.
Sure, I'll start. I appreciate the work session. Just so you understand, the planning board, we spoke briefly at one or two meetings about this, but then we wanted to have this work session. We wanted to hear what the council had to say, and we'll be back with recommendations quickly after this so that you can decide what to do, if anything. But we appreciate you meeting, and we did want to hear your ideas as well after reviewing the report. And I think everybody at the planning board has thought about doing things potentially in stages. As Mike said, you take a couple things, you put it in, you don't do it all, and we try some things. But clearly, the emphasis has been on time parking for the businesses. That's what's come out. The location of off-site parking is a more difficult thing, obviously, but every time, and then I followed up and talked to some of the restaurant owners, and that's been their main push is the time parking. And not surprisingly, interestingly, the Boone Street one-way has gotten some play. People think that's an interesting idea and could accommodate parking on two sides. Caswell Street and some of the other streets. I don't know how Narragansett Avenue fits into that. We have to talk about all that because there's some permit parking there too. But there is a new restaurant that's opening up there. So there needs to be some accommodation for the businesses, so. You guys have anything? Joe?
Yeah, it's so interesting after the last time we got talking about this at our hearing. I think it was the next day I was driving down Boone Street late afternoon. People were walking along with their coolers, you know. Two of the cars in front of, well, not exactly in front of PJ's there, those spots were gone the whole day. So I you know, I mean, Narragansett wants to be friendly, I guess is a good way to say it, but it's obvious from the study that was done. I think, we need consistency. Obviously, there are things that can be improved, and some areas that are touchy, like putting meters up. I don't know how everybody in this room feels, but I know it's done, but, that's a little heavy, but to do nothing is not the answer. And I think the study points out some things that I think we can do without too much pain, and do it incrementally. But I can't imagine if I had a restaurant on Boone Street and looked out the window and saw these people arrive, with all their gear and get out, and they didn't come there to that restaurant and eat or buy anything from the restaurant. The only good thing is I didn't see them turn the cooler over, out in front of the restaurant. But it's time to tighten things up. Yep.
Okay, so a couple thoughts. One is I just met my girlfriend in Newport for dinner the other night, and I went to go pay. They do not have meters anymore. They have a pay by plate. It's like a box, and you don't even print out a ticket or anything. You just walk up to the machine, you type in your license plate number, and it's $1.25 for an hour. So I think that's pretty reasonable, maybe almost too cheap, but it's not an eyesore because the boxes are, spread out so that maybe every 20 spots uses one box. And then you can do a max of 3 hours. So it cost me, not much money to go have a nice dinner for 3 hours. So I thought that was cool. And I'm sure, I don't know how that system works because I don't know where that information goes, but I didn't even have to, like I said, print out a ticket or anything. What else did I see over there? One of the banks, we don't really have any banks down here, but one of the banks had shared parking. So if you were going in to do banking, then it was free. But if you were using that lot for something else, there were a certain number of spots that you could pay again at a box, which I don't know, we don't have that many businesses that makes sense for, but, so those were a couple things I noticed. Boone Street Park, I used to be really opposed to the idea of turning that into parking, but the more I think about it, we have a unused t-ball field right in front of the elementary school that has tons of parking. And so I think a lot of people say, oh no, that's the t-ball field, we can't do anything with that. But we actually have a great one, and it makes more sense because there's parking there, and it's next to 2 other baseball fields and a playground. So I don't know, that making the t-ball part of Boone Street Park into some more parking might not be a bad idea. Well, the neighbors on Boone Street, when I think about pretty much anything on Boone Street, I feel bad for the people who actually live there as opposed to the people who run businesses there, because that is really different. I also like the idea of having Boone Street be one way and then south, and then Ocean Road one way north. I think it brings a lot more parking, and I think it actually, if you diagonal the spots on Ocean Road, you would have more spaces. You definitely would. So those are my main thoughts. Again, I also think we have to do something.
Time parking.
Timed parking, yes. It's not we don't need to make it. I didn't even flinch when I paid my $1.25. It didn't stop me from anything.
But the time isn't even paid parking. The time is just
Well, I think we can have,
It's just
I
2 or
think we
3
can
hours.
have both.
No, I know, but it doesn't have to be paid.
In other words, if they go, the meter maid goes by, she marks
I get
her
it.
tire.
Then it's
and
ticketed.
She tickets.
Yeah. So,
But
Which we
I,
have now, which we have already in certain spots.
But I-
So-
to Mike's point, most of Boone Street is not. And
Right,
that
I'm
hurt-
just saying
and that
other parts
hurts
of
the
town in the
restaurants.
pier, you know, like at the post office right up front,
Right.
15-minute parking.
Exactly.
Every time that springs up, I hear, people go, oh, well, this changed the block, and they didn't know it, and I just spent $100 on a meal, and then I had to pay $50 a park.
but I paid $3.75 to park. Like, I'm not,
There's a time limit thing,
Right.
and then you're over, then it's $50, right?
Right.
So, well, that's what came up
One
a
of
couple
the
years
things,
ago when we went to time limit.
one of the variables that we have to put into play, even with timed parking, is when is it effective? Just like meters in the city. Meters go off at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock in the city. So if you park at a meter at 5 and it goes off at 6, but you're staying till 9, you only need to pay for 1 hour because after that, it's over. So timed parking would presumably end daily at a particular hour, 6 o'clock, something like that. And so for dinner time, that works. For lunch hour and breakfast restaurants, there's a different thing. But just to keep in mind that we have 2 aspects of timing we have to work with.
well, I think we have another one, and that is seasonal, right? Because the other thing Newport does is it shuts off all those meters, and all those lots are free. I think before Memorial Day. So the entire winter, that's free parking. Street parking and those, public lots that you pay for.
Then you got anything?
Yeah, I just think you have to emphasize, I mean, a number of us sitting around this table have been lifelong residents of Narragansett. And to Patrick's point, whenever there is a change, somebody says, I don't like that. I don't like that. To advance Mike's point, which I don't know if he's mentioned it here tonight, but if we're going to approach a recommendation for any of these 5 or other suggestions that may come up, you do it in phases. You pick the one that you think is going to be the most effective first in all the variety of reasons, and you grab that one in 2022 and then 2023. Believe it or not, I think that the least, once it's in place, noxious or complaining element would be your Boone Street one-way circulation. It would get, when you came out of the box with it, probably an uproar from the more vocal minority that would be going up and down that street. But I think once it was developed, those people that complained most would enjoy it best. And so, but you just have to think, what's the timing of it? I absolutely agree with Robin that a system of a metered or a more modern metered, the way those work, by the way, once you enter your number in it, you have to have somebody that monitors it too. So it doesn't work if you just say, well, it's a complete honor system, go and plug your license plate in. What happens is the meter person goes around and they plug the number in, and that number ties in to what was plugged into the box, and it's all done by internet. So it all tracks one another, and it'll say, oh yeah, that number, license plate, I'll use one that I'm familiar with, I-234. That license plate for Vincendalia isn't in the system, so he either didn't pay enough money or he's out, I can go meter it. The infrastructure for it isn't that big, but remember, that's an item that you folks will have to consider at budgeting time is we need an employee or employees that would monitor that system. And I don't know how much that was considered, and we are a small community. Are we a community that's like Central Falls that's going to go broke over it? Absolutely not. But it will be something that those who are elected have to answer that question and balance it within your budget.
But if we use the funds that we get from the payment, that would probably cover.
You know, everybody, yeah, of course, you always try to use earmarked funds.
Yeah.
But as we know, those funds probably just go into the general fund, and once it goes into the sinking fund, it goes into the sinking fund, and it never, and then there's always somebody that says, oh, I counted the number of cars, and there were only 5 of them, and, you know, you pay the meter man $80 an hour, or whatever it is. So, yes,
that's why
you
we
try
look
it,
into
but
it,
that's an issue.
And Mike, is it true for the Ocean Road, if you were to meter that? Because I put it on the council agenda a long time ago when Dean Hoxie was the acting town manager, and I got
State.
killed. But I would support it today. But is it true that in front of the Coast Guard House, the state would take a portion of the money if you were to meter that area?
Here's the answer, ask them. You know,
I
it's
don't
a
know the
state
answer.
road.
I
It's
don't
a
know the
state
answer to
road.
that, but I can tell you that old-school meters that require electricity could never be on that side of the street because we don't have any power on the ocean side of the road. So some advanced technology beyond old-school meters would have to be in place.
The system that they use in Providence is called Passport, and it's completely automated. It's, you know, if you go there and you want to park in a parking space, there's numbers on, the meters are still there, but you can't use them. So they have numbers on them, and if you have a Passport app on your phone, you just plug in the number, that you sign up for it, but then you plug in the number, and, you know, I do believe that somebody has to go around, like
Yeah,
you
you
said.
still have to monitor it if you want to
Right.
collect on it, right?
Right, but I mean, you know, it's an incredibly easy process, way different from trying to plug money or a credit card into a meter that's taller than I am, so I can't see it. Used to drive me crazy. So it's, you know, there's many different options there that you don't need electricity for.
And
They have
this is,
Wi-Fi now.
right, and this is all designed in order to create more parking and organized parking, right?
Correct,
And
correct.
to force the parking from, oh, I got here at 7 in the morning and there's a spot there, I can stay there all day while I
Right.
go to the beach. Which, it's okay that they go to the beach, we're just trying to force that long-term parking to a long-term area.
And I just want to, in these discussions, it seems people are ready to jump on the Boone Street time parking for the restaurants, and that makes sense. People are less reluctant to do it on the seawall.
Right.
But I don't understand that if we have 3 restaurants there that need turnover. The people who park on Boone Street all day long presumably are using the beach. The people who park on the seawall all day long presumably are using the beach. They're not residents, right? They're generally, for the most part, residents are going to park in the lots. So the seawall, but the seawall, for whatever reason, and you'll hear it as the public comes in, gets more backlash about time parking than Boone Street. And I'm just throwing it out. I'm not sure I
But they-
understand why.
But
They
let
are
me
two
tell-
different, I mean, when you think about Boone Street, it's a little bit different. There are some different issues. So when we talk about it together, Boone Street is one particular area, and then the pier is the other. I think not all of them are going to work in both areas. And so strategically, as we said, if we're going to do a couple and do them well, this is 10 years in the making, right? So we probably should try a few, but I think they wouldn't necessarily be in both.
But like anything else, so one thing you might want to try, again, it's a change issue, right? It's a bad issue, it's not we're hurting people by it, really, these things aren't hurting anybody.
Right.
But, so if you run it as a pilot, you know, you put it up as a question before the council, we want to budget X amount of dollars for a 24-month pilot. We all know that by the end of that pilot, nobody is going to object to an extension of that sunset unless, you know, your council changes or whatever. I don't think that they, I could be wrong. Maybe there will be people that will object 2 years later to the way it worked. And finally, I would probably approach the Boone Street thing first because it'll get you your most aggravation first, but you're going to get it out of the way, but it's going to solve a circulation issue. And you got a lot of nice things going there. I don't necessarily agree with Robin on the parking in that corner area where they have the T-ball
field.
section. Not because I don't think it's a good use, but it's only a good use for, it's like a guy that buys a boat in New England. You get from July, August, and part of September for your boat, and what do you do with it the other 10 months, right? They all complain about it afterwards. So you'll have this empty, structured parking area that becomes something other than parking. It won't be full-time.
And
So I'd be
remember-
careful about that expense.
Remember, the consultant did suggest considering half of the seawall for time and half not. So I just don't see the distinction between the two, but whatever, that's for further discussion.
So that's what I had to say. And by the way, maybe the last time you have to hear me on this side.
And then Mike does have some stuff I don't know if you want to show it on the Boone Street.
Let's get some more comment, and then we
Okay.
could go to it. Mr. Brady, so what we're doing basically just kind of sharing some initial thoughts.
Yeah, I apologize. Unfortunately, I'm in a job that doesn't have hours. I think it's a balance. I think you have a balance between, obviously, the tourism and the summer, and you have a balance between local businesses, local residents. And striking that balance is probably going to be the most difficult part. I agree, starting with Boone Street and the wall area, it's probably, I mean, it is the largest conflict, is the largest impact, and let's face it, it's the most visible. I think whenever happens, not everybody's going to be happy. There are things that make sense, and there are things that make sense, but maybe not are practical, and I think that's what we have to work out from this point on. I liked the approach. Sometimes the detail wasn't there that I thought could be there, but now you're talking about a 3-year study, 4-year study, and you're talking millions and millions of dollars, and I'm not sure that's going to glean out much difference. So my focus would be that the Boone Street, not only for the parking, but as Vinnie said, the circulation, but also the wall. And I think the question then becomes, who is our constituent? Is our constituent the local community and businesses, or is it the tourists? And that's something we need to balance also.
Thank you, Mr. Brady. All right, let's go around the council. We'll go in our usual order. And also, just a reminder that we do have our assistant solicitor here for any legal questions as well. Susan, you can go ahead and start us off.
So I just want to thank the planning board and manager for getting together again and reviewing this area again. John Burke, 10 years ago. So it's good that we're talking about it tonight. And I actually love a lot of the recommendations. A lot of them are similar. Time has gone by. I think Boone Street, is a little bit, different. A lot of businesses. I think the 2-hour, and I did a focus group myself, walk the street and talk to all the businesses as well. And they love that they have 2-hour parking. They, like the idea, Robin and I agree with using some of the park that we own, because I think year-round residents will use that. I go to Boone Street, I try to get into PJ's, I can't park. So I don't think taking away the whole park, but I think if you look at some recommendation and use some of that for parking, I think it would help. They also said visibility. When you drive down the side streets off Boone, it's not really clearly marked where you can park and how you can park, and a lot of the businesses had, mentioned that extra lighting. But I like a lot of the recommendations. I just think Boone Street is the better area to start, because it's got some mixed use, it's got some residents, it's got some businesses, and it lends itself to people that are using it year round. I think we have to, I agree at this point that we could do some time parking on the wall, but I think we have to go slow and steady, and I would say start with Boone and head out. So that.
Thanks, Susan. Yep. Eva?
Yeah, so obviously, parking is always an issue, especially during the summer, mostly during the summer. So again, I also think we do need to do something. I know we did the study a while back, 10 years ago, so nothing was ever implemented then. So I did like some of the ideas. I do like the seasonal time parking on the seawall. I also like the time parking on Boone Street. I actually like the lot idea as well on Boone Street. I talked to Jim about that earlier today. And one of the things, too, that we brought before the council was actually a request from a business owner on Ocean Road was, a lot of the spots that are taken on Ocean Road are not just, the beachgoers, but its employees that work at those restaurants. So we had put an agenda item on, and it passed for, the restaurants to be able to utilize the school for parking and have a shuttle that they would pay for. That was the agreement. And I know that Bobby was going to try to solicit, try to get that to move forward, but it really never did. I don't know if there just wasn't any interest from the other businesses. And did that come up in one of the focus groups that you guys?
I don't think so.
No, yeah.
The employee parking?
The employee,
The
so the
employee
employee parking, because we're talking about how, the restaurants on Ocean Road, a lot of those spots are taken by the employees that work at those various establishments.
Yeah, it did come up briefly, but not in the vein of thinking about creating an agreement between the town and the businesses to allow employees to use the elementary school or the high school parking lots. But it did come up as a concern and a problem in this sense. If we were to put regulations on all the streets, as I showed you before, there are several that are not regulated, and that's where a lot of the employees have been parking. They know, just like the tourists know, which ones don't have regulations. If we regulate everything, then where do the employees park? So that was brought up to me by more than one of the businesses. So it is an issue to wrestle with. It's one of those action reactions. We're going to take a positive action, or what we think is positive action. We have to be ready for the unexpected or the secondary consequences. So it is an issue. I think we have to keep that in mind, that employees need to be able to get to their employment places of employment within a reasonable walk. So it has to factor in somehow. I totally agree with that.
That Boone Street area becomes the place that they go to park, right? And that's going to happen. We're talking about two businesses on Ocean Road, right? We're talking about
Well,
and the rest.
there's four.
There's four.
The biggest one you're forgetting is the towers.
There's a Monahan Coast.
Yeah,
Sure.
I know.
Pretty much matched.
Yeah, but wouldn't that parking lot be used for people that would use the business on Boone Street? Like, why would you bring, employees?
I just said
Yeah.
as a natural tendency, what's going to happen, somebody's going to say, oh, well, just go
Park over there.
walk up off Ocean Road and park your car over there.
I like the shuttle.
Have any other thoughts?
Yeah, one more thing. So one of the ideas that I guess may have come up from some of the focus groups was also the trolley. I mean, we always hear about the trolley, but it was in the sense that the town would be running the trolley again? Was that a recommendation? Because I kind of opposed to that because of the liability issue.
It was a very general sort of a comment. People liked the trolley. If you recall, there were two antique trolleys. There was a white one and then a natural colored one. They were really cool to ride in.
Put them out of business.
But we had a problem with, one of the problems we had, I think the problem that kind of put them out of business had to do with the insurance.
Right.
And, that's outside of the planning world, so I don't know exactly what happened there. But it wasn't discussed at the level that you're asking of how we would manage it to make it better or to make it work and be successful. All they said was, we like the trolley. We think it could be utilized to promote the entire pier, not just be a beach trolley.
But Eva, you're right, it got knocked off because it was going to the beach. We did some commerce, but it wasn't as successful. So the chamber is now looking at doing their own thing with the trolley that would, be a private entity.
Okay,
Just
yeah,
so you
so-
know, it
all right,
has nothing to do with the beach.
Okay, good. So as long as it's not the town that would be doing this, it'd be, not, that we wouldn't be liable for that. Yeah.
What is the concern if the town did operate the trolley in a seasonal area? Is it because we'd have to pay for the insurance for it?
We wouldn't be able to be insured for that because I remember having that conversation with our past solicitor where it's, you can only get up to a certain amount. And that would, if God forbid anything happened, that wouldn't really, we would be on the hook for.
There was an issue regarding the interlocal trust and the insurance that
Oh, what they would cover for
Yeah.
with that insurance. You could buy a different insurance, but we go through the insurance guy.
But if it's town-owned, it was different, wasn't it?
Yeah.
If it was town-owned, then the trust would cover it.
Exactly, but there's
Yeah.
private.
But because the private guy, he had to get, yeah.
So why wouldn't the town at least commission a further detailed look at that idea, where if the town could operate the trolley, we don't need to do it for profit, but if it benefits the off-street, the street parking, and helps funnel that stuff for beaches down toward the school, and then does what Susan said, and circulate around.
Yeah, if it's, I think we could think about, if it wasn't, again, like my concern was the liability issue. So if we figured out a way around that, or, and actually, I think those trolleys were auctioned off anyway. I remember an auctioneer had those, they were sold, I don't know who,
Yeah, but-
does,
Yeah, but
did
now
Patrick buy
Mike
them?
owns them.
Did you? Oh,
No, they,
Sell everything.
we put him out of business, okay, because he couldn't afford the insurance. Because in the commercial livery business, if you say the T word trolley, the insurance goes through the roof. Because you got people standing outside
Yeah.
the drinks and hanging out the freaking, the San Francisco treat. It's a disaster with insurance. It goes right up, right out of the. right
So
out of
school
the
buses are better?
School buses are better, right. So that's why he couldn't afford it to continue. Yeah, well, you can't, I would just send a different picture and, have the trolley, but
Or
just
the
send a
private
picture of a
industry
old
could
bus or something,
This is an area that I have no problem dumping into in that sensitive areas. Can this be done in a conjunction with the beach and offset? I mean, they're gonna benefit from this in the future.
Enterprise fund, let them handle it.
I just wanted, the trolley, we had it, the town ran it, we had an issue with Corey with his service, so they're looking at a private way because it's just easier with the insurance, just like they do in Newport and Providence. So I'm not sure the town at this point it's beneficial as opposed to a private person. They don't have to worry about their insurance, the town's, interlocal trust insurance, so it was very complicated, and I put it on twice, and I'm having a private conversation with the chamber so they can do something privately.
Eva, anything else?
yeah, that was really it. And then just, I think just starting slowly with, and then really not necessarily talking about the paid parking. So just doing the timed limited parking. So that was it.
Great. All right. Thank you. Deb.
So just one thing I wanted to clarify. When we talk about making Boone Street one-way, which I think is a great idea, we would do that, but not do anything to Ocean Road at the same time. That's the idea that everybody has, right? Ocean Road would remain two ways.
Right, because it does say a loop. So does that mean Ocean Road would be one way in that section too?
Yeah, the proposal was that it become a loop.
I like that idea.
And it would start at Kingstown Road, go to South Pier Road, southbound on Boone, I would imagine. And then the section between South Pier Road and Kingstown Road on Ocean Road would be northbound. But does one have to be, do they both have to be? I haven't thought about that.
Yeah.
Maybe they don't.
Ocean Road's wide enough, I can understand Boone Street.
I'll tell you one thing that would be nice about it, though, is like if you are sitting outside on Ocean Road eating, if cars are only going one way, they're probably not going to be as obvious and loud and annoying,
Well,
as they are today. So
In
just a
both
thought.
cases, in both cases, you could accommodate a bike lane,
Right.
which we don't have
Right.
now. Now, that's kind of a separate
And more
tangential
crosswalks.
issue.
And more
from
crosswalks,
parking.
right? Yeah.
And what?
More crosswalks, she said.
I'm surprised nobody suggested that you just make it a pedestrian way in the summer. That'd be really cool, but I'm sure it'd be really, but the problem is that there's not enough, streets that can do that.
I- I-
Yeah, oh, yeah, yeah.
That's going to be,
The
I
the
agree
other
with that.
advantage, if I didn't already state it when I was presenting, was that on Boone Street, you would double your parking. Did I say
Right.
that?
Yeah,
If I
because it
did,
would be on
thank you.
both
Sorry.
sides, right? Yeah, it would be on both sides, which would be probably really beneficial for Boone Street. It doesn't solve the Ocean Road problem at first glance, but if we're going to do this slowly, which I do think is probably a good idea, that makes some sense. And I definitely agree with the idea of timed parking. I think that that serves so many, issues. It resolves so many issues. It reduces the number of people who are going to park there all day, and it also makes it possible for more people to find a place to park, to either shop or eat or whatever they're going to do on Boone Street, if that's what we're going to do, and I think that makes sense. So I do have some other thoughts about some of the other suggestions, but I think we have to take them one at a time, so that's fine. Oh, I would say one thing. We could do something else in conjunction with this, and that is replace handwritten tickets with an electronic device, ticketing device, and I think that would be really efficient and also give us much better information, especially if I was the one ticketing, because my handwriting's illegible. But, I think that would be worth taking a look at. I can't imagine that it would be excessively expensive, and I think it would just be a beneficial thing to do.
Cool, thanks, Deb. Patrick?
Okay. I don't think we have as much as
Yeah, we should move it.
You want to use the mic, because I can't read it.
Here, I'll show it on the map.
shut me down here. First Amendment here,
So what you would do,
I don't think we have as much as a parking problem as a demographics problem. I think if we eliminate nightly Airbnb, that will cut down the flow for those 2 months in the summer. That will immediately cut it down. I mean, you just won't have the volume of people in and out overnight. So, does that make any sense?
Yeah.
I think the restaurants on Boone Street might have an issue with that statement.
No, but I think that what happens is.
They
you
could-
can't
they-
Airbnb there, you Airbnb elsewhere, and you drive your car in. you park in the
Right.
center.
I'm just saying, because,
It might be outside the scope of this workshop.
no, it isn't. It's a demographic problem.
I agree, but there's a lot of ways to solve parking that are like
But if you cut down the.
ordinance, okay.
If you cut down the demographics, all right, you have less people showing up for these precious little parking spaces, okay? And nightly, there are a lot of towns, I think Newport, well, I think maybe not Newport, but there are towns cutting down nightly Airbnb.
But if you have an Airbnb, don't you park at the owner's location?
Yeah, but they leave there and they go down to the pier.
So this is, I'm just gonna make the executive call that is a valid discussion that we have in
All
town,
right,
but
all
it's
right,
not
all right.
really.
That's as far as I'll go with that one, all right? Okay.
Right. Yeah.
All right, all right, 2-hour parking, I don't know, what is it now? Right now, what's Narragansett Avenue? Is that 2-hour now?
It's permit. I think it's permit,
Right,
no overnight.
right.
Patrick, the stretch from Central Street to South Pier Road on Boone,
Right,
from Central Street to Rodman Street in the summer
right,
is packed with beach people.
right,
And the restaurants never get any turnover
right.
from there.
Well, every time you have time parking like this, then you got people on the move.
On what?
On the move, driving around looking for new places to park.
Safety.
So you're creating more traffic by moving people every 2 hours. That's something to consider. So, anyway, we're talking a span of 2 months. All right, paid parking, no, I don't like parking meters, that's what, I know other coastal towns may have parking meetings, but I'm not on board with any parking meter in Narragansett unless it's a new public parking facility, then we could have kiosks there. But as far as meters up and down Ocean Road, I'm against that, as I'm against cameras everywhere. Right? No cameras, no meters.
Can I just say,
Sure.
I don't think the meters come into play anymore with the technology. I think people have apps.
When you
Right.
say
and,
meters,
you
you're
know-
just saying paid parking.
Any type of paid parking.
Okay, it's not just meters,
Right.
this unsightliness of meters,
If we
because
have,
that's
if
not
we
an issue.
have a designated public parking, then kiosks, I could see that. All right, so, all right, agreements, parking lot agreements, I don't know, the only one that comes to mind is St. Thomas More Church, so. Handwritten tickets to electronic handheld, that's fine, I'm on board with that. All right, the seawall, as far as the seawall, is people coming and parking there. Wasn't there 4-hour parking there for a while? No? We talked about it, okay.
Never.
No?
Nope.
That's part of the charm of Narragansett. It's coming here, park, do your thing, then leave, you know. I know some people are hogs, and they'll be there with, you know, a step van camping out. So, I don't know, maybe cut it down a little bit, but don't you need state approval for that too, right?
We do, but we have had some early communications with RIDOT that have said that they would consider allowing that to happen.
I would say minimum 6-hour parking. So.
They didn't, the only thing they said, they wouldn't allow us to
Part
regulate.
of the charm. Yeah, it's the part of the charm. Well, a lot of people show up at 6 and they leave at noon.
Right, but you don't start your restriction until like 8 or so, and then you end it at like 4
Right.
or so, so if people come 5 and they want to stay all night, they can.
Right.
So,
All right, let me just zip through these real quick. All right. I like the Boone Street. We can do along the basketball on Boone Street, do some angle parking. Mike, is that something you came up with?
Mike, you mind pulling that up, that rendering? Sure. Thanks. I know you had it ready.
But
All
I'm,
right, so
yeah,
that's what it looks like today.
right,
This is a conceptual layout.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
someone has done. And if you can read it, it says 44 spaces. This
but the
be
yellow
about-
would be angle parking?
Yes, you can see the back, you can see the edge of the basketball court.
Right,
So it would take over where the existing basketball court is and the existing tot area. Those two things would move over, and we'd still have a little green area here for the very young kids to play baseball.
so you wouldn't pull in off Boone Street then, you'd pull in that side lot off Congdon? Okay, all right.
why wouldn't you make that structured parking?
I didn't.
Structured like a parking structure? Is that what you mean? Well, it's, I mean, that's much more invasive to the
And during the
residents
winter,
there.
you can flood it and ice skate. Towns do that? Towns-
I mean, to do all that work and take away 44 spots, it's not a lot. I don't know. I'd probably take a look and see how much traffic, parking traffic, this 44 spots take, away. It's just not enough. That's my opinion.
Problem is, what do you do with that for the other 10 months of the year?
The premise of this schematic was to not lose any of the existing facilities.
Correct.
So, and to be cautious, be sensitive to the property owners on Congdon Street.
Right.
You know, maybe this parking area wouldn't come this close to this property here. Maybe we'd cut it short and install some vegetation that would buffer that property also.
That's
But
an
we didn't want to
Airbnb,
lose the
man.
other three elements.
Let them suffer. No. All right.
Does this become, that's the view you're going, do you see this as all-day parking?
I would say it would have to be, right? I mean,
It could be.
I guess my question is, what are we trying to accomplish here?
Just finish, let's go through the council, and then we'll get back to more open discussion.
all right. The other thing that, like events, like the Patriots Stadium up there, they let people park in their yards. But I know that's like a zoning sin. It's like a mortal sin in the zoning
Same thing
law,
at Saratoga.
Galilee.
you know?
Yeah, the
If
horse
you have
race.
a lot and you're
course.
personal and you let a couple people pay to park in your yard.
They do it in Galilee.
That would take some of the sting out of parking in the pier, but that's.
That wasn't part of our consideration because it's not allowed under zoning. Is
I
that
know,
right?
I know, but we can change the zoning, but I
Yes,
know,
sir.
God, that's, God forbid. All right. All right, reduce the impact. Yeah, Boone Street, so over that, that would head north to south, one way?
Well, the thinking was if it was a loop, it would be southbound and Ocean Road would be northbound. But if you were just considering Boone Street being one way and not changing Ocean Road at all, it would be your pick, whichever way seems to work the best.
Yeah.
And maybe we would have a traffic engineer give us some guidance on that.
Right, okay. We'll be around for that. Okay, the pier trolley, the whole, yeah, like we talked about earlier, the guy couldn't afford the insurance, the trust wouldn't cover it, so it would have to be a Narragansett entity, the town of Narragansett. The enterprise fund on the beach, let's stick it on them, that sounds like a great idea. They got the means, that would be under the trust, right? For insurance purposes? Yeah. And let them, let them have a loop for the beach. Parking garage, where would we stick a parking garage? The only place I could think of is the west beach lot in front of Canachet, but I'm sure those folks aren't gonna like that one. One-way traffic, increased violations. We're already at $50. I don't know how you can increase that. We just became 50 the last 3 years or something, right? About 3 years ago? Shorten the effective dates, I like that. Let me see, covers pedestrian amenities, they're on their own as far as I'm concerned. Just pay attention. Airbnb. The other thing we didn't address, how about resident parking? How about a resident pass where you can park anywhere? Because, we want to serve our constituents, as this gentleman said. If you're a year-round resident, I think you should be issued a parking pass where you can come and go as you please.
That did come up in one of the focus groups, the focus group with residents. But
And Narragansetts, let's not
So are you saying a year-round resident or a taxpayer?
year-round resident.
So it'd be like the homestead exemption where you prove that you're a year-round resident and you get that
Sure,
sticker?
if you're getting the homestead, you get a parking pass.
the only drawback a drawback that comes to mind.
Litigation? No.
Why is that a drawback?
Yeah.
Said the
Great,
lawyer.
that's what we need.
Another lawyer.
Yeah. There's a lawyer in the room.
The drawback to that is that then, would residents then use the seawall as their parking lot and not take out a beach parking pass? And we would just have the same issue along the seawall with local cars instead of with tourist cars. I don't know the answer to
Well,
that, but I'm just
if
raising.
you go with the time parking, they still have to adhere to the timing.
But then what is
Okay.
it, how does it
That I didn't
advantage
know.
them then?
Yeah, so what's the advantage to the resident parking if it?
Convenience for residents.
Right, but it doesn't give you any. If you have to adhere to the 2-hour parking just as a non-resident would, then it's not actually giving any value.
Spot's either there or it's not, whether
Right.
you're a resident or not.
Right.
So,
Well, I don't know.
Sorry.
Boston for a while, Cambridge, that area, where neighborhoods had stickers. So that people that lived on certain streets would have stickers, and they would be designated priorities or certain time things. That's one of the things we talked about doing, where they're readily identifiable, scannable, or whatever it might be. But I agree, if you give carte blanche, you're going to get carte blanche.
Okay, then we limit it to where the streets, the secondary streets or something.
So we have some permit
we
parking
have
now,
permit.
right, and that's based on streets.
actually, from Kingstown
In the pier,
Road
yeah.
to Central Street.
You could
I
also,
believe is
you
all
could also,
permit
yeah,
parking.
I'm sorry, you could also accommodate employees with a similar
Right.
sticker that they can be scanned.
Patrick, anything else?
That's it.
Okay, all right, I have a few things, and then we can see where we're at. First I would say, I think that Mark made a great point. In general, it's just the overarching theme of this whole exercise is, what's the goal, really, of anything that we implement? And I think that we all generally agree that it would be to improve the day-to-day life for residents and local businesses. That would be generally, I think, the goal, without driving away tourism, because you still need that for the businesses, obviously, because that's going to hurt the businesses if you make it so hard to park as a tourist. But we don't want to do anything that seems like it's achieving something, but then there's unintended consequences in the off-season. And What I mean is things where we're actually structurally changing areas that then are an inconvenience or a hassle when you don't need the parking, when it's not the summer. So and when I say these things, I'm not sure how I feel about any of these yet. I think they all have merit, and they all have potential, but we're just kind of still talking through it. So if I bring up a negative, it doesn't mean I'm against it, it just means it's a question that I think we should be asking. So one case would be the one-way on Boone Street, and maybe if you did that on Ocean Road, if you do that loop, that may be a benefit in the summer. However, as a year-round resident, trying to go through the pier, coming, just making my way back, it does seem like it would be a pain to then have to avoid that street when parking doesn't even matter in the winter. Because you're not going to need that extra parking, and now you made an inconvenience possibly going through there. I mean, maybe you get used to it and you just know which way to go, but it's just something that I think should be thought about a little bit more in terms of year-round usage of that. Let's see what else. For the timed parking, I think the timed parking is like the definite. To me, that's the first step. I would say, in my opinion, that going straight to paid parking would be, and again, it's just my opinion, but would be a little quick to do now. I would start with just the timed parking and then maybe think about the paid later, because they're very similar in what they achieve. The paid parking is a little bit more aggressive, so it's going to probably deter some parking in the first place, because some people will not pay on principle. But if you're talking about turnover, they're similar because they're timed. One you pay and you're timed, one you just are timed. And on Ocean Road, it's really all about the beach. And I mean, it's for Boone Street, it's all about the beach too. For all this timed parking, what you're trying to avoid is people parking and bringing their stuff to the beach. And that's really it. So how do you avoid that? And if you do 2 hour on the wall, then it's not enough time to go to the beach. So that pretty much stops people parking on the wall and on Boone Street and going to the beach. And then it is enough time to still have drinks or go out to dinner. But if you were gonna make it metered, if you were gonna make it paid, we'll forget about the meters, because that wouldn't have, it would just be the kiosk. But if you made it paid, then, again, as a year-round resident, just think about your daily life. If you just want to go and park on the wall for 20 minutes because you need to run a quick errand or grab something from Monahan's, right now you could do that. You're not causing an issue because it's turnover. You're doing it quickly. But now you're going to have to pay, and you're going to have to, and a couple bucks, fine, but you have to stop. You have to go to the kiosk, put your card in, or use the app. It's just a little bit more of a hassle, I think, for a resident. But even for the summer, it's still a hassle. I just don't know if that is necessary when you can achieve something very similar just by doing the timed parking. If it's 2 hour parking, if you're doing something for a half hour, you don't have to deal with.
It's kind of like the thing that, locks are there to keep honest thieves away.
Right.
The timed parking, of course, if everybody's an honest parker, it's going to pay it's a timing. But if you're not, and you've got to pay for it, and then you might get hit otherwise, it just seems that by paying it, you do. The other thing is, I think you're right, timed is definitely a good way to start.
Right.
That's why I said do things maybe in a pilot method, right? Tell everybody in town it's going to be a pilot. We're going to do a time for a year. Now everybody says, oh, that really worked out well. Or they forget how much they proposed it. Now you come back and say, well, now we're going to do metered parking. And to your point that, yeah, if you only just want to run down there and grab something in Monahan's, okay, but if you don't have any of the type of restriction, the poor guy that's a resident homesteader, right, he's not going to find a parking space anyway because somebody's parked there for all day. So,
Oh, I agree. And I'm not, maybe the paid
I
makes,
wouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
I would start with the time, I would start with the timed and then possibly do the paid later. And again, just my opinion. But I would just see how the timed worked. Let's give it some time and see if it improves the situation.
I think the incremental idea of any of this is essential because
Right.
not only are you going to find out what works and what doesn't work, you're going to find out, okay, we solved this problem. What other problems have we caused? And there are going to be, because you have an X factor of certain, you have an inflow of X, and that's going to be there. And so it's got to go someplace. And then the question, where does it go if you force it from one place to another?
Yeah,
The other
right.
thing, too, is maybe you look at the time framing. I mean, we always joke, my wife and I always joke, is, do you want to do the first shift at the beach or the second shift at the beach? Because it always seems like people leave, they stay until like 1, and then leave, and then the second shift comes in. So maybe you do it more than a couple of hours, and you give some people some time. You could, on the Moynihan quick grab thing, you talked about having a residential sticker or something, which, if it's a residential sticker, you override the time thing. So you could stay there and get it quick and go. Or you could designate certain parking spaces, any side of the business, as 15 minutes quick grab and go, and those click off. But the bottom line, going back to you, is the business person in me. I mean, I don't know about you, I go into Boston, it's like, okay, so parking's $50 and the fine is $25. I'm taking the fine. And so that becomes the balancing issue also. So it's one of the things to look at.
Right.
And I think, like, talking about the traffic flow on Boone and Ocean Road, if you just incrementally did Boone, see how the traffic, you may find that it alleviates some of the flow on Ocean Road just because of the fact that it creates some sort of loop without having to condemn everything from one to the other. And then incrementally, you can do it seasonally, and that gets a little bit confusing of, we're now September 1st, so we're going to go two-way again, and that can be a little crazy.
Right.
But there are incremental methods, and I think, your thought process is there.
Right, yeah, no, I mean, I think it's good to just bring up the questions, because then you can think about, creative
Which way
solutions.
would the one-
Let me just finish a couple more things. It would go south, that'd be one way south.
One way south, yeah, okay. That
Right. Just two more quick things. With the time, though, Eva brought it up, the trolley. The more I think about it, we do have to think about where those employees are going to park, since they do, they're not going to be able to do it if it's 2-hour limit. So any sort of way that the town could facilitate some sort of shuttle service, I think if you could do that in tandem,
We shuttle
it makes
elderly
sense.
people now around.
Right, well, maybe it's a service that the businesses pay the town for that service, whatever is the easiest way to implement it. The Boone Street, so I've talked to a couple, me and Robin know a lot of the same people because of our kids are a similar age. And we know there's not many people, younger families that live in the pier anymore, but there are a few that live along Boone Street. And when I brought this up, it was a very negative reaction because they just don't want to have a paved area that you have cars going in and out when now it's grass. Like, it's grass, why would I want to have that asphalt with people going in and out? I do think that it makes a lot of sense, though, if you take away the input. You'd have to get more input, really, and see how people generally feel. But you push everything in. It's not a huge change in terms of the layout of the structures. So you still have the basketball court, still have the playground, you still have the field. And that field's not used that much, and it's really younger kids doing t-ball stuff. But if you ever play basketball down there, like when you're driving there and you're like, oh, I need to park by the park, and it's warm weather, you're not going to get a spot in those like 8 spots there. It's just, you're not going to get it. So it is a natural place to have additional parking. Mike, I think 44 spots is a good amount. I mean, I guess you could compare it. If we had a number of what you have going down Boone Street, we could kind of have a relative feeling about if that's decent. But then if we did something like a structure that you brought up, and I'm not discounting it fully, but again, you build something that's a structure that's kind of like a bigger thing in that neighborhood that people will probably be against right off the bat, and then it's empty in the winter. So you're not really utilizing it that often, just for a few months a year. So I wonder if maybe the 40 spots, less intrusive, is just a better way to go about it, and actually much cheaper, much cheaper. So.
You can always start with those, and you could go up later if it makes
Right,
sense.
yeah, the same thing we've been saying, right?
My question to you is, what if that became designated parking for a neighborhood sticker and employees?
Well, for employees, I think it's great.
And
I
then
And I guess
I
neighborhood would
don't
be
even know
fine.
if that's enough, but I'm just trying to figure out,
It can't become beach parking. So you asked
Right.
before.
Yeah.
If it's gonna be public parking, it has to be like 2 or 3 hours, because otherwise that's just a new beach lot.
Right.
People will walk down. We know it. If you talk to the bike stop owner, she'll tell you, she'll just watch people get out of their car, like you said, and they'll just have their beach chairs and they walk from there. So it's, I mean, it's the worst
But
situation.
you could have employee placards or something, and
Right.
so that they could stay as long as they needed to.
So I think that lot would benefit the neighborhood, even though you're gonna have some residents be against it. So it's kind of like a tricky thing, because I think it would help them, but their gut feeling is that they don't like it. And the last thing I wanted to ask was, what kind of turnout you got for the focus groups? Because we have the input, but was it like 5 people, or was it 20?
It wasn't huge, to be honest with you. The businesses, oh God, let me think now. There was like 6 or 8 in each of the meetings. That was about it.
Residents, same?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
I think the resident meeting was the best attended of the 3, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Jesse, can I make one point?
Yeah, I'm all set. I just wanted to throw those questions
The
out.
grassy knoll there on the Boone Street side. Nice.
Yeah, the grassy,
All right.
yeah.
Is that, it seems to me that's big enough, but we're gonna have parking going one way to the south. Could we put angle parking there and keep the basketball court where it is?
I looked at that some time ago.
Remember that? That's why I'm mentioning it.
Yeah, let me go back to this
Wouldn't that be
picture
the
here.
quickest, cheapest? Yes, yeah, why
So-
don't you just pull in, angle parking all the way to that area, and that's something we could do quick. It's something that, it's gonna be conducive with the one-way on Boone
It
Street.
would be less than half. It would be somewhere in the area of 18 to 20 spaces.
Bing, snap of the,
And you would have to cut down all the trees, all the nice trees along this stretch right here.
can we just
so-
put a sidewalk over there?
One of the things that I tried to accommodate in this schematic was to leave the trees there
Right.
and bring the parking lot in onto the existing asphalt area and onto the existing tot area. So there's pros and cons in both of those ideas, but you are correct that you could accommodate a travel lane and angled parking between the edge of the basketball court and the sidewalk line.
And so Deb has a question. I just want to ask just a secondary question off of that. Is angled parking right on the street, is that fine in terms of general practice, or is there danger to backing out into
Maybe
the
I should
street?
turn that question over to the cop in the room. I know that, I know that it's a very difficult thing because people, it can cause accidents.
Right, because you back out blindly.
People back out
Yeah.
and they can't see cars coming because they're looking diagonally across the street. They're not looking down the lane.
Right, yeah.
I think it's been implemented in a back-end sort of situation in certain places so that you're pulling out in a forward manner. But
I'm just
I can't
curious.
identify a place that it's been done. But
Okay.
I've been told that that happened.
if I
Has-
could,
I just want to let Deb had a question a while ago.
no, addressing this, in Franklin, where I live, we had one-way traffic, okay, and it was a circle through the downtown. And so we went back to two-way. And one of the things to look at was adding parking, because that was, the businesses were like, people just look quick, they don't see anything and they go. And the question was, could we do angled parking? And the consultants there said that they only would recommend it where you can recess that angled parking in, so that actually you're pulling out into dead space.
You have a buffer.
Yeah, you have that buffer between traffic, because exactly what Mike said. They said people look at the way they're gonna go. They don't look what's coming behind them.
Okay,
Well-
that's good to know.
Do you have enough room there for dead space?
All right, we're going to let Deb speak
It
now.
looks like it.
Two things, I'm going to use one of those. Two things. One is that one of the suggestions in terms of timed parking was 3 hours rather than 2. And I do think that has some merit, certainly is worth consideration for a couple of reasons. One is because it would kind of address Vin's issue about people who do want to go to the beach and having, your 2 different sets going. 3 hours is more likely than 2. But also because sometimes when you're out, with a group of people, you're eating at the Coast Guard house, you might not be done in 2 hours. So just, depends on what you're doing. So that's one thing.
We do 2.5 hours.
Sometimes,
I'm just kidding.
it depends on who
You
you're
can't-
with.
it's too much
It depends, you could have,
Too much math.
some of us talk a lot.
It's like, oh, it's 112 and then 2.5
That's it.
hours.
So you do 3 because there's also alcohol involved. But anyway, the other thought was, actually, somebody mentioned this to Susan, and I think it's a good point, is that if we're going to create more parking, we need to make sure that the parking spaces are marked, because people park so weirdly if they're not. In other words, there's lines. So people will, because you can get people who, they'll just take up a space and a half for no particular reason, except that's how they park. If there's lines, they have a little bit more order to it. With the whole space, you could just, you could have motorcycle spaces. I've seen that in places too.
Yeah, I've
In
seen
DC, sometimes they have motorcycle
Actually,
spaces.
that's a great idea, because
Yeah.
that would open up additional spaces.
Yeah, so
And
just a
those,
couple of,
those you could do parallel.
yeah.
Those you could do.
You could do angled,
Yeah,
yeah,
angled.
yeah. I've seen that before. So just, those are a couple of things to take into consideration.
Susan? Oh, okay.
Do you want-
Did, we can all say more, whoever wants to, but as the chair, are you looking for like any, real specific direction or anything like that? Or you just want to
No,
get kind of?
this discussion is sufficient for us to at least get it, take a pulse of the council and go back. We're going to make our recommendations, as you know, you may accept them or not. We've been down that road before with other things. We're going to make our recommendations, but this is very helpful, I think, to us to hear what the council members think. So appreciate that.
If I was gonna say what I think that I would, what I think I've heard, you guys can kind of give me a consensus, is you do agree with the concept of slow and steady. No
I think so.
substantial change all at once.
Yeah, I
What do you guys think, everyone, generally speaking?
No cameras, no meters, no kiosks.
No meters.
We'll do a new
Can I just
Airbnb
make one
ordinance right now.
simple clarification, Mr. President, which the solicitor stepped out, but I know this is probably an obvious answer, but anything you do, so you don't have to spend months and months undoing something that doesn't work, can we put sunset on any parking ordinance so that it expires by a certain date?
Yeah, that would make sense. What I'm saying, you phase it, right? You say, okay, to take Mr. Pugh's suggestion that, no, I think I wouldn't do paid parking, I would start off with just time.
No,
parking.
but
And then you make it for, our recommendation would be that it be for a 24-month period.
a sunset at time, so it ends unless the council takes action to extend it.
Right, well, it would, no, it would end.
Or it would end, and, yeah, I just said that, it would end.
Force the issue to come back in front of the council.
Correct.
Again, for
So the idea is that it then gets kind of reevaluated.
Reevaluated.
Right.
Because as you know, to change an ordinance requires public hearings and referral from us. But if it ends at a certain date, then you, in advance, preempt that and hold hearings to
And you
either
go through the
extend
same
it.
process as if it's new again, right?
To extend it, I think so. Yeah. As long as you can put that on.
And I would suggest it be a 24-month period, because as we all know, time moves quickly, right? By the time you get to reassess it, instead of that, we're gonna say it's only a year, we're only really gonna get one season of a test marker.
But we should also have an assessment process for whether it worked or it didn't work
Right.
too. We need a recommendation.
That would be on your side, though. Instead of having to come back to the planning board for a reassessment, it would go on to you. Of course, you could always recommend a committee, or you could refer to the planning board for a recommendation, but I think that by putting it there, somebody's gonna say, your solicitor will say, wait, don't forget, this is gonna sunset in 4 months. Throw it on your agenda and
Yeah.
say, let's extend it or not extend it, or we want to amend it to add meter parking.
And if you don't make an extension, it just dies.
Correct. Correct. Yeah, like what works? Yeah, that is exactly, much more succinct than I
So
was.
we'll come back to you.
Okay, and I want to give our public safety officer a chance to speak as well. Jim, any thoughts?
Back to pick you up later.
It was an interesting study, and Mike worked very diligently on this. And I, too, agree with that Boone Street is a great place to start. I've think the exploration of some parking in the Boone Street, in that playground area, is also something we should look into a little bit further. And I agree with the, when I say metered approach, I mean the gradual approach. We start off slow, and we do the public campaign so the people know, public service announcements, what we're doing ahead of time, and then proceed. We have a lot of research to do still. But
Okay.
I'm happy with it.
Great, thank you, Jim. I just want to make sure we get this in before we close up. Is there anyone from the public that would be interested in speaking? Mr. Lynch? Dennis, how you doing? Do you mind just stating your full name and address?
Sure, Dennis Lynch, 22 Central Street, Narragansett. Turn on the mic. So I think this was valuable.
Oh, is the mic on? The red light.
It is on now.
Okay.
Dennis Lynch, 22 Central Street, Narragansett. So, yeah, the planning board came to get direction. It heard about taking things in an incremental path. I wouldn't lose sight of the fact of what Jesse expressed as a sentiment of the council as it relates to the goal being to improve the day-to-day life of the residents and local businesses. I think that's a worthwhile overarching goal without totally excluding the value that tourists bring. But putting that top of mind, I think, is helpful. We use this consultant twice, and I think that represents the fact that staff thought it was a valuable expert. They were there 10 years ago, back again this time, and I would recommend focusing on the 5 recommendations from the expert. And in the expert, the first 2 are the ones that you've talked about a lot in terms of timed parking on Boone Street, timed parking on Ocean. The one that frightens me is the notion of altering traffic flow. So when you start talking about loops, so I live a block from Ocean Road. And in the summer, on the weekends, there's an unending 10-hour stream of slow to no moving traffic. And I'm no traffic engineer, but if you were in a loop scenario and you wanted to put one of those directions of traffic up on Boone Street that has cross streets at Rodman, has cross streets at Central, has cross streets at Kingston, and they will flow in all directions, that would require an awful lot of study and thought before hopefully you move forward with that at all. Just the one-way Boone, obviously, that in and of itself will require careful thought and consideration. So if you're really looking to start out in a conservative way, I would say go with the expert. I've sat in focus groups and come up with things that shot out of my mouth, and I thought it was a good idea at the time, and 15 minutes later it's like, did I say that? So I mean, not to discount them wholly, but it's it's ad hoc, it's stream of consciousness there. But the 5 recommendations that are laid out here, I think, are excellent to start with. And then if Memorial to Central works out in time parking somewhere down the line, you look at going south of Central as well, at time parking on Ocean. So I just wanted to support the general conversation, but I wanted to put a big flashing light around if anyone's changing traffic flow, especially beach traffic into residential neighborhoods. That is something you're going to have to look at very carefully and be thoughtful about. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lynch. Anyone else interested in speaking? Catherine, come on up. If you could state your full name and address, please.
Catherine Celebrato, 48 Earls Court. Totally opposed to carving out a parking lot at the Boone Street Playground. In the first place, the town owns this property, but how did we acquire it? Did we buy it? Was it given to us? Are there conditions on its use? You're just like proceeding with carving out a parking lot. You really have to do some research. But this is a green space in the town, and I can't even imagine that you're thinking about doing something like this. This is going to cost a lot of money. The basketball court will have to be moved, playground equipment, which needs to be replaced anyway. It's just to what end? So that parking lot is going to be what, more beach parking? Is that what we're talking about? Or employee parking, which really isn't the residents' responsibility. But I'm totally opposed to altering that playground at all. we shouldn't be doing something like that. On the one hand, we're supporting a $25 million, bike bond here to get people on their bicycles, and on the other hand, you're carving out more parking. We're going in two different directions here, but the playground thing is a no-go as far as I'm concerned.
All right, thank you, Ms. Celebrato. Anyone else? Nope. Okay, looks like that's
Jesse,
it.
could I just say one more?
Sure.
I don't want to make sure I made it clear. I would like to, on behalf of the town, I'd like to thank the planning board for all the time and effort they put into this, the resident focus groups, the businesses, and the restaurants, and the time that the town council has put into this as well. This has been active for years, off and on, and it's come to the surface again. And as I said a short time ago, I agree, we still need to do more research on the recommendations, but we have some solid groundwork to start with. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Jim. So if everyone is all set,
One more question.
Okay.
Number 4, did you find a business that would have a shared parking agreement? Can you think of one property that fits in that, model? I can't think of any.
No. As far as a business lot, no. But you did raise, St. Thomas More has a big lot. And of course, we have a small to medium lot right here, not to mention the 2 school lots. Those are the ones that come to mind off the top of my head.
Trolley here, pickup.
all set, Patrick?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
All right, thank you all.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, we appreciate your time and look forward to the recommendation coming at some point. Thank you, Steve, Marcella, as well, for attending. And Susan, I think you were the sponsor of the motion initially, so thank you.